All rise for the jury.
Jury, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please be seated. Attorney Kossick.
Thank you. Agent Christiana, I just want to go back to when you described what your job was. You testified that you're an FBI agent. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. Specifically, you work for the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Is that right?
I work for the FBI.
You are assigned to the JTTF.
I am assigned to the GTTF. I'm employed by them.
The JTTF is a branch or a division of the FBI, affiliated with the FBI. Is that right?
It is affiliated. That's
Okay. So you're employed by the FBI, yes?
correct.
But you are affiliated or associated with the Joint Terrorism Task Force within the FBI.
That is correct.
Right. And your office, your Joint Terrorism Task Force office, is based in Bedford, New Hampshire. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And your specific duties at the Joint Terrorism Task Force is that you are a bomb technician. Is that accurate?
That's one of the many.
Okay. That's one of your jobs, though.
One of the many.
Right. That's one of them, though, correct?
Correct.
And the Joint Terrorism Task Force is was instituted after 9/11. Is that accurate?
No, they actually existed pre-9/11.
Well, they did exist pre 9/11, but as a general proposition, they didn't expand until after 9/11.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
So after 9/11, in an effort to combat terrorism, these were expanded into different states. Correct?
That's fair to say. Correct.
And you, is there one that's just, is it central to New England, or is there one in every state? I'm just talking about the New England states now.
In the New England states, it's based out of Boston, and then there are smaller JTTF groups in the other New England, in the other states that are part of Boston Division.
Okay, so they're part of the Boston Division.
Correct.
And in order to have these I'm going to call them JTTFs for brevity, they include not only FBI agents, but other parts of state agencies fall under that umbrella.
Correct.
Is that right? And in order for that to happen, you have a memorandum of agreement. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Secretary.
I'm going to back up a little bit. We heard you on direct talk about your involvement in an investigation involving Mr. Paul, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You were in charge of setting up the surveillance equipment on the confidential informant who's no longer confidential, Richard DuPont.
Correct.
Correct. And you referred to him as, with a code name, Socrates, correct?
Correct.
That's the name you gave him.
Correct.
Right. And you also refer in the beginning of the recording to an FBI case number.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
You did.
And that's the FBI case number. The case number you refer to, 28RBS, I don't know the right number, 104582.
That's our number.
Is that right?
Yep.
That's your number. So that's your investigation number. That is not the Drug Task Force investigation.
Correct.
So you had a separate investigation happening at this time.
That's correct.
Which came first? Your investigation or the DTF investigation?
It's more or less simultaneous. The way it works is, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know when the Attorney General Drug Task Force investigation actually commenced.
Did you contact them or did they contact you?
They contacted me.
But you already had an open investigation, correct?
No.
All right, so we're getting to a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing. So they're simultaneous or one came before the other?
No, actually, I misstated myself. My investigation was open at the request of the Attorney General Drug Task Force.
Okay,
My
so-
assistance was requested, and as a result, I opened up the matter in order to provide them that assistance.
Right. So in order for them to do that, there has to be some kind of, there's a memorandum of agreement between the FBI as far as your,
Objection, permission to approach.
Portions of requested anything. The agreement references all the United States. References but it references the agreement, so it references that the joint forces are involved in all the United States.
Are you aware whether there is a cooperation agreement between the FBI and the Joint Terrorism Task Force in the state of New Hampshire?
I am aware that there is an agreement between the FBI and the New Hampshire State Police.
Okay, so the New Hampshire State Police, as an agency of the state of New Hampshire, there is an agreement.
Correct.
All right. And is that agreement entitled something like a cooperation agreement or a memorandum of agreement?
I believe it's an MOU.
A memorandum of understanding.
Correct.
Okay. Are you familiar with that agreement?
Not in detail.
Are you, well, you work for this agency, correct?
Yes, I do.
Right. And you participated in a joint investigation with the state agency. Isn't that right?
That's correct. But one has nothing to do with the other, though, right? The MOU is between us and the state police is for them to participate on our task force. This investigation had nothing to do with the task force. I can elaborate on that.
Please.
This is an extra duty. When I get a request from a state or local agency, one of my duties is to provide local and state agencies with investigative assistance. And that's what I did in this matter. I was requested assistance, and I provided it. It had nothing to do with the Joint Terrorism Task Force.
Who requested it?
The New Hampshire Attorney General Drug Task Force.
Who from the Drug Task Force requested your services?
I can't name one person. There are several people that, I'd say the one person that I recall discussing it with was Officer Newton.
All right, so at some point in time, Officer Newton called you on the phone? Is that how it happened?
No, this was in person.
Objection is pending. May I have a question? Yes.
Questions are answered.
All right, so you received a request from Officer Newton.
Correct.
Is that correct? That's who you recall it being.
Yes.
There might have been somebody else, but you don't know.
He was he was definitely the person I recall discussing it, our possible assistance with, absolutely.
Okay. And so let me ask you this question. How many of those kinds of calls did you receive? Any year, roughly?
I'd say a half dozen at least.
All right, so you receive around 6 calls a year from the Drug Task Force?
No, I'm saying all agencies.
Okay. From the New Hampshire Drug Task Force, how many of those calls do you receive in a year?
That's the first one I have ever received from the Drug Task Force personally.
The first one you've ever received?
Personally.
Okay. And you're not aware of any, if you're not aware, it's fine, of anyone else in your division receiving one of those calls?
From the Drug Task Force?
Correct.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. And I guess I mean specifically requesting this kind of surveillance equipment.
No, ma'am, I can't give you another instance of a specific request like that.
So again, without saying what people said, you get this request for assistance specifically with surveillance equipment. Is that accurate?
That was the majority of the request, yes.
Right. And there was more than just you involved. in coming to be involved in this investigation. Is that accurate? There's more agents involved than you?
There was a task force officer.
And was there another FBI agent involved?
Actually, at one point there was, yes.
All right, so there was you and agent, I can't pronounce your name, Capitoloko, is that correct?
She might have been involved. I remember more clearly an agent named Brendan Galloway.
All right,
Who
well,
assisted.
there was a woman standing in the video. Did you remember looking at that, seeing that woman in the video? I'm not gonna make you look at it again, but,
It probably was Agent Capitolupo.
so it's Capitolupo, is that correct? Okay, so it was you and Agent Capitolupo and Agent Galloway,
At one point, yes, ma'am.
and what about, was there a Bishop, Agent Bishop?
Yeah, he's a state trooper, he's task force officer.
Okay, he's not FBI.
Yep, state police.
All right, so there are 3 FBI involved at any given time.
Correct.
So when you came with your surveillance equipment, is it the common practice for you? Are you required to open your own case file?
Yeah, when we get these requests, we obviously, I have to make sure that it's a request that we can fulfill and that we should fulfill it. And then in order to provide the assistance, we have to open up some form of a matter, an investigation, in order to document that assistance.
And how do you decide whether or not you should fulfill it?
I discussed it with my supervisor in this instance.
Is there some kind of protocol you have to follow?
Discussing with my supervisor.
Other than discussing with your supervisor, what is it? Are you able to describe what?
It was very simple. I mean, he's my direct supervisor. He has to be aware that we get these requests, and then essentially he approves of the request or not.
And is there, again, are there any criteria for the approval that you're aware of?
There's no specific criteria. I mean, obviously it has to be a legal request. It has to be in an area that we have an expertise in. It's more along those lines. And if we have the manpower to provide that assistance.
Do you remember what the date was when you heard from Officer Newton or Trooper Newton?
Not off the top of my head, ma'am, I do not. I believe it was sometime in March
In March?
of 2012.
All right.
It was either March or early April, late March, early April.
All right, so you come with your surveillance equipment, correct? And we saw it on the video, you placing on on Richard DuPont, correct? Are you, in those preamble parts where you're on the camera and you can see one other person on the camera, are there any drug task force agents there at that point?
There are.
Okay. And you don't talk about them, you just talk about yourself, and you talked about Officer Bishop, but you don't name everyone else that's there.
That's correct. I didn't name everyone that was there.
Okay, so you named yourself, and that, we heard you name yourself and Officer Bishop, or Agent Bishop, or however you refer to him.
Yep.
Okay, so there are other people there,
Absolutely.
you just don't include them in your preamble.
Correct.
Why is that?
It's really just, there's no real purpose. That's just the way we normally conduct it. 2 people kind of team up to do it to make sure it's done correctly. So he's there to check me, make sure I don't forget something, and that's the reason we just put the 2 names on.
All right, you're involved in this. I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry to interrupt. I think we're gonna need to close the window. I can hear voices outside. I apologize for the interruption, Kim Kossick. I
That's
just
okay.
wanted to make sure that everyone can hear what's happening in the building. Please
Fine.
proceed.
Thank you. So you were involved in this investigation from the beginning to the end of the
Who's
arrest. You're involved from this investigation from the time you put, physically involved, from the time you put that wire on Richard DuPont on April 17th, right?
The 17th, yep.
And to the time that Mr. Paul was arrested?
I was off and on, I wasn't there for every event.
Were you there for every event that involved a surveillance camera?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so there are other surveillance videos that exist that don't involve your camera?
Don't involve me, correct?
Okay. So you only used the camera on the 17th, the 27th, and the
That's
30th,
it.
another day?
No, just two.
When the incident would end, the controlled buy, however you want to put it, you took custody of the camera and the recording equipment, is that correct?
Correct.
And you took them back to your office?
To process it, absolutely.
So you're the agency that created these videos, not the drug task force?
I think that's fair to say. We conducted the recording, downloaded the meeting, absolutely, and then provided it as evidence.
Okay, so you provide a copy of the recording to the drug task force?
Correct.
And you retain a copy for yourself, I assume?
Correct.
Right. Were you present when Mr. Paul was arrested?
I was not at his arrest, no, ma'am.
Were you present after his arrest?
I was
And where was that?
at the Keene Police Department.
Did you speak with him?
I did.
Was that recorded?
It was not.
And why wasn't that recorded?
It's not our policy. I'm not allowed to record interviews.
You're not allowed to record interviews. Why is that?
It's against our policy
What's the policy?
that we're not allowed to record interviews.
Right, so the policy of what, of the FBI,
Correct.
is that you're not allowed to record interviews?
Yeah, that's correct.
But you're allowed to record, I guess, you're allowed to record with some kind of federal authorization, I assume.
Say that again?
Well, in this case, there had to be, I assume you understand that there had to be and it's been testified to, there had to be an authorization from the Attorney General's office in order to make this recording.
The Attorney General Drug Task Force had to get authorization on their side, and I get separate authorization to do it from the FBI.
Right. So you can get authorization to make a recording.
That's correct.
Okay. So you can, if you got authorization to make a recording of that conversation, you could have gotten authorization
For
to record your interview with Mr. Paul.
I might have been able to, yes.
Okay, did you attempt to do that?
I did not.
Right.
So I knew it to be against policy.
Because is it against policy to record or against policy to ask to record?
As a rule, we do not record interviews. I know that from my training.
Why is that?
There are exceptions.
Okay, what are the exceptions?
Well, the policy's kind of changed over the years, all right, or it's still evolving. But as a general rule, we do not record interviews, and I knew that to be the case. And that's why the decision was made not to record the interview.
All right, so the policy is evolving. Is it written down somewhere?
I'm sure it is.
Have you seen it?
Now, recently,
Okay. So do you know the last time it evolved? When that was?
I don't know when it was revised,
Okay.
the revision date.
So it's not, this isn't something that you get, I guess, and I'm not trying to trick you, I mean, this isn't something that you get a handbook for, and there's a, Directive 1.2A that says you shall not record interviews.
I might have 20 years ago in my initial training.
Right.
And that's where I take it from, that rule.
Okay, so that might have been the rule 20 years ago, or it was the rule 20.
It was the rule 20 years ago, absolutely.
But you're not aware whether or not that actually is the rule now.
I know it to still be the rule. I know there are exceptions when agents have recorded interviews, but as a general rule, we don't do that. And to err on the side of, to be within the policy, one, you have to get approval to do it, so you have to have the time to do that. And two, I just knew that it was safer not to record it,
Why was it safer not to record it?
to avoid a possible violation of the policy I know to be in effect.
Okay, but you weren't alone in the room, correct?
I was not alone.
Right. There was another officer there.
Correct.
Did he ask to record it?
I remember having a conversation about recording it, and I brought up the issue, how it could be an issue for me, how it is an issue for me to record it. So it was agreed upon not to record it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure I understand. Your understanding of the FBI policy is that you are not allowed to record any interviews.
As a general rule, absolutely.
But there are exceptions to the rule.
Correct.
And what are the exceptions?
I've never tried to exercise them. It's more of gaining approval and going through that approval process, all right? That's one of the elements of it. So you obviously have to have the time to get that approval. That means I have to then reach out to my supervisor and maybe others. You don't always have the time to do that. And quite honestly, I wasn't interested in recording the interview, so I never went down that road. I knew as a general rule, we didn't record interviews. I didn't want to record the interview. I didn't seek the exception.
Okay, because you didn't want to,
Correct.
because you didn't want anyone to listen to it? Or,
No, ma'am?
okay, well, what'd you talk to him about? Let me ask you this question. Did you take any notes during the interview?
I honestly couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
All right, so
I don't recall making any notes. If I did, it would be in my file.
do you have your file with you?
No, ma'am.
All right, so you don't remember taking any notes.
I do not.
Would it be your practice to take notes?
That varies. Some interviews I take notes, some interviews I do not because it's distracting to the conversation, and some people don't appreciate when you take notes, and that's the reason I believe I did not take notes in this instance, because Mr. Paul would probably have a problem with that, and it would distract us from the conversation we're trying to have.
Well, he was under arrest, right?
He was under arrest.
Okay, so, did he tell you he had a problem with it?
I never asked him.
Okay, you thought he might, but you didn't ask him that.
I did not ask him.
And you didn't ask him if you could report it.
I did not ask him if he could.
And the officer that was present from the Keene Police, to your knowledge, did not ask.
That's correct.
So, in other words, you pick and choose which conversations, interviews, interrogations, however you want to put it, that are recorded, or recorded either verbally or recorded in writing.
No, ma'am, I've never recorded an interview in my 21 years.
All right, well, have you ever, you took note, you've taken notes though, you just said.
Absolutely.
That's what I mean. I mean, I don't mean just recorded on
Yeah.
audio tape or on a,
Yeah.
surreptitious videotape. I mean, have you ever, you've made contemporaneous notes
Absolutely.
of interviews before?
Yep.
Okay. You did not do it this time?
Not to my recollection.
Okay, not to your recollection. And you don't have your file, so you can't check.
I can't tell you that.
And you said that your reasoning for that was that you thought that Mr. Paul might get mad at you or might be upset about it?
No, that it would distract from the conversation we're trying to have.
Okay, what was that conversation about?
We really didn't have much of a conversation. It was very short, actually. Mr. Paul cut it off.
Okay, so what was the short part of the conversation about?
I basically asked Mr. Paul if he was willing to cooperate.
In what way?
We never got into what that cooperation was. I never got that far.
You asked him if he was willing to cooperate, I mean, in an investigation? Is that what you asked him if he was willing to cooperate in?
That's correct.
Okay, so you got that far, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What was the investigation about that you wanted him to cooperate in?
I never,
Objection, Your Honor.
yes.
Well, first he said there was a short conversation. He said before that, he said, but there's just apparently more, and it was come up. I could go on, but like, I can realize it does. That's kind of what the end of the, wanting to cooperate. Well, do you think you could say that asking him just a follow-up question too, so asking him to cooperate, and ask him in 1 year, do you ask him to cooperate?
May I confirm my,
Just. Then you ask him to cooperate. I was meant to ask him that, because it must be this is his name. So, what, no, that's, I wondered, what if he asked him, do you ask him to cooperate at that moment, not, what's he thinking about? And the road. His intern suggests to me that he asked him to cooperate with something, and he said, hey, you cooperate, this is, this. That's what I mean. Okay.
I understand.
Okay.
If you want to consult with Mr. Paul.
All right, Mr. Christiana, or Agent Christiana, I'm sorry, I don't know how to address you.
That's fine, either one's fine.
Okay. Let's, I'm gonna step back just a little bit, and I don't wanna be repetitive, but I wanna make sure that we're in the same part of our conversation, okay? You just said that you asked if he would cooperate,
I did.
okay? With what did you want him to cooperate?
I thought that Mr. Paul might be able to provide us some information that would assist us in another matter.
Okay, what kind of information?
Information, basically stuff that he was aware of, information that he was aware of.
So, you thought that he was aware of some kind of information that would be beneficial to the FBI,
That's correct.
right, and to the Joint Terrorism Task Force specifically?
Correct.
Did you want him to participate, or did you ask him to participate in the same kind of operation that was ongoing with, this with Mr. DuPont?
No, ma'am.
Did you ask him to wear a wire?
I did not ask him to wear a wire.
Okay. You didn't ask him but you outfit him with a wire.
I did not ask him to do it, no, ma'am.
Okay. Did you suggest it?
I said that it was a possibility.
All right, so you said it was a possibility that would be part of the investigation. Is that accurate?
That would be part of his
You're just
cooperation.
making me guess a little
That would
bit.
be part of his cooperation.
Okay, that part of his cooperation in whatever it was you were doing would be to,
That other matter.
correct, that would be potentially to wear some surveillance equipment.
Correct.
Was he offered any kind of consideration for that? Did you offer him any kind of consideration? Is my question.
Well, yes,
Mhm.
yes.
What was that?
We told him that we could help him with the matter that he was arrested for.
You told me you could help him with the matter that he was arrested for that day. This matter.
Yes, absolutely.
Essentially.
Yes, yes.
And that's it. And so, did the matter involve activities at the Keene Activist Center?
I can't go into that, ma'am. I'm restricted from talking about that. Where you're headed with this.
Commissioner George?
One thing, Mr. Paul, ordinarily you would not have the opportunity to listen in simply because otherwise, if you would have, I'm sure that if council wants to confer after the bench conference, you would be permitted an opportunity to do that. Okay, let me just say, that gentleman that was just within, you are to be removed from the courtroom. You are not permitted back in the courtroom for any further
Perfect,
part of the
perfect, great, thank you. Good day.
Yeah.
But it's not like me asking him.
so the last thing you just said to me was that you can't answer my question, is that accurate?
I can't talk about the other matter. That's correct.
Can I just have a minute?
Absolutely.
If it pleases the court, I'm sorry, is it okay if I, because he speaks very loudly, because this is his hearing problem, am I able to take him out of the court and do a conference room?
Absolutely, that's certainly we can make that accommodation.
I'm finished, thank you.
Further examination?
No redirect, thank you very much.
Any of these views? Members of the jury, it's now 4 o'clock, and again, I apologize for shutting the window, but it became difficult to hear the witness. We'll try to keep the window open, keep the air flowing. I know it will make everybody more comfortable, but we can't do that without everyone, the jury and counsel and the defendant being able to hear clearly the proceedings. So I appreciate your patience, and we will resume tomorrow at 9 o'clock with the trial. Remember my instruction, until the evidence is completed and I've given you my instructions on the law, not to discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else, and not to do any independent research or analysis concerning any of the issues in the case, because your verdict must be based on the evidence presented during the course of the trial, and as I instruct you at the end. Again, we all appreciate your patience. The fact that we were delayed in starting today is not the fault of the defendant or either counsel in this case. It's simply a function of the court's schedule, and we appreciate your patience with everything. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you.
All rise for the jury.